Welcome again, everyone. This is Jose Palomino, your host for the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And our guest today is Matt Coyne, President of Brandywine Mergers and Acquisitions. And what we're going to talk about today are how do we take the guesswork out of what creates value for your business, taking the guesswork out. So without further ado, let's welcome Matt to our show. Welcome, Matt, to the show.
Hello, Jose. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm so excited that you could be part of the Revenue Throughput Podcast today. And I'm really interested in getting your insights on a couple of things. But I think for our audience, it would be helpful to maybe provide a little context beyond my introduction. Just maybe tell us a little bit about, like, in your own words, like what you do and who you do it for.
Okay. I help small business owners, so small to medium-sized business owners, sell their business. It's the most simple way to put it, but it's such a big topic, right? It's something that someone spends or invests their whole life into, and then one day they decide to sell it. And how does that happen? So that's a whole, we could spend hours on that, but essentially I'm the one at the end, I'm the deal guy. And me and my team, we are the deal guys. We get a buyer, we get the deal done, and we bring the owner into a new form of life. And the form of life would be a post-working life, which for a lot of people, it's a tale of kind of working for the buyer for a while and then retiring. So it's that whole world that I play in, that I only get to meet somebody once in their life, but it's probably the most important financial transaction they're ever involved in.
Now, as opposed to, and I know perhaps many of the owners who are primary part of our audience would know this already, but let me just say, because I know we've had these conversations before, Matt, unlike, let's say, selling real estate or selling your car, it's not something you can decide today, I'm selling my business, and then tomorrow you have a buyer, except in some very, very rare fortuitous situations, right?
You can do it, but it's suboptimal.
Okay, describe what do you mean by that a little bit.
If you're not ready to sell, you're going to spend most of your time in a due diligence process. Like for us, when I have a client that's unprepared, we get a really good buyer, and then we start getting into the detail, and they say, okay, can you give me a list of this, or do you have, all of your property? Is it in the right name? Or do you have non-competition agreements with all your people? All the things that add value to the company in transitions, right? There's value of the company while it's operating, and there's value of the company that can survive a transition. If you haven't done some of that stuff, we're good at what we do. We've been doing this almost 20 years. We can overcome all those hurdles, but they're artificial hurdles that have been put in place because the owner has not prepared for the sale process. So we shoot all of our silver bullets on stuff that's just silly. I mean, it's no other way to put it. It's just silly because it hasn't been prepared for. But I do recognize I have clients that did not want to sell, but for a health issue, but for the death of one of the owners, right? Those are issues that we scramble and we get the deal done. But someone who is healthy, a business that is healthy, with some basic planning and say 2 to 3 years of time, it could be a completely different outcome.
Wow. So that when you look at, and obviously we're not talking about like, not typically strategic acquisitions like Google buying a software company, but mainstream kind of businesses, manufacturing, small to mid-size, maybe $10, $20 million size businesses. What do you see as if there is such a thing, as the number one thing a buyer is looking for to determine value, like that really moves value forward when they observe that?
Transferability. So what has created income for the owner, the previous owner, how much of that can come across? Okay, so that's employees, that's technology, that's customer concentration, that's product and service concentration. A business that has made all of its bread and butter on one client has been wonderful for the owner because they have a relationship with that client. Once that goes to a new owner, is it transferable? It's questionable, right? Are all the employees going to stay? That's what it has to be, that transferability or the certainty of transferability. Nothing in life is perfectly certain, but there are things that can be done to make sure that what was there day one makes it to day two. And I'm going to give you a second answer to it as well. And then the ability to grow on top of that. So ideally, it's this business that's diversified and as well, it's good, nice product mix in the pipeline, the ability to grow. It's kind of growing on its own. And then you throw money behind it, serious money behind it. Like a business owner like me could never have that kind of money. When you put that money behind it, it just explodes. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the thing that just needs more gas in the tank. and in comes a $150 million private equity fund with nothing but money to spend. Boom, off it goes. That creates real value in the eye of the buyer.
Right, but so let's say I'm on the sell side, right? So I have my business, and let's say for the sake of round numbers, it's a $10 million a year business,
Okay.
and I'm throwing off again just to use round numbers, 20% EBITDA, so I'm doing $2 million a year out of my $10 million top line. Sounds like a healthy, nice business to own, right? And so you hear so much about like multiples of EBITDA and these kind of back of the napkin kind of calculations, what the company might be worth. But then I have a big company, maybe a Fortune 500 company wants to buy me. How easy is it for me to translate my success into their context to justify a premium value?
You have to be something that's easily absorbed. For example, if you have a really out of date infrastructure, IT infrastructure, they look at that and that's a risk to them. That's a cost to them.
Mm.
So if you want to play with the big boys, if you want to be acquired by the big boys, you need to look like a big boy. Now you can do that in this world. You can go to Costco and get QuickBooks for $300, right? You can go, it's on online, $20 a month for QuickBooks, and you can start to build a business that has monthly financials, that looks at product line profitability, that does all the things that the big companies do. All those tools are out there for small companies. So when they look at you, when the big guy looks at you, if you have the same metrics, the same types of tools in place, granted on your scale, that they can just simply absorb into them, that's a big piece of it. Because they're used to looking at small businesses and, the books and records are all up. They don't have a good accountant. They have no idea where they make their money. No idea. They make $10 million that turn 10 million in revenue turns into 2 million bottom line. Ask them how they did it. They can't tell you. That's a big turnoff for the big guys, because the big guys can tell you exactly where they make their money. Now, does that make them better? No. It's just they can tell you where they make their money. So all of these types of things. But you know what, Jose? It takes somebody who's working with, honestly, some type of coach, some type of consultant to say, okay, how do you make your business look like this? Because for a business owner, if I made $2 million a year bottom line, which I don't, but if I did, I would say, who cares where I make the money? I make $2 million a year bottom line in the United States of America. That's a good thing. It's only when you start to say, look at the big guys, look at you and say, well, how did you do that? What do you do in a downturn? What are your contingency plans? All the things that big companies worry about. If you're not worrying about them as a small company, you won't be attractive to a larger company. It's too much work for them.
And how about kind of a different value question, but it ties back to just day to day, which is to what degree does a growth pattern, let's say the last 3 years have shown 10% year over year growth versus it's been holding steady at that $2 million EBITDA. So let's say it's not even $2 million yet, but it's showing an upward swing. Does the trend line impact valuation, or is it just snapshot in time, you are what you are today?
The trend line definitely impacts valuation. Okay, most businesses are going to be priced based upon a multiple of EBITDA, as you pointed out. Okay, and those multiples are in the eye of the beholder.
Okay.
Right, it's strategic. A buyer is going to have their multiples. Sometimes we have multiples 4, 5, 6. Sometimes we have 7, 8, 9. All depending upon the situation of the buyer and what the buyer can do for it. But if you can show a trend line, let's say you did $1.5 million, $1.8 million, 2.3 million of EBITDA, there's nothing to say that 3 million is a stretch. You've proven that there's a capability even on an owner's capital constricted growth diet, right? So even when someone's just using the cash flow of the business to grow, it's growing on its own with, little old me running it. Imagine what happens when we get some really smart people, like the corporate people, that I want them to think they're smarter than me, because that means they'll pay more. But once that growth trend is there, that's amazing. If it's just stagnant, there's two reasons it's stagnant. One, because the owner's not very good, or two, the market is just sick of it. And you can't, then you get into the argument of no, if I worked better, if I worked harder, it would be growing. Don't waste your time on that argument. Introduce some new products, refresh the product line, refresh the service offering, show that it's growing. Because I'll tell you how many businesses I have where the owner is 64, looking to retire, that they're growing. They're not. They're on the other side of the bell curve. And we're making the argument, but for a new owner, it would be growing. Once again, it's a wasted argument.
Wow. So, but you brought up a kind of an interesting topic, which is kind of a meta thing about whether you're selling a business, running a business, and so on. And that is that growth is something you have to be working on continuously. So if you run into somebody's looking to sell and I don't need specific examples, but that you see, what here's an owner, a leadership team that has not taken their foot off the pedal. I mean, how obvious is that to you that they were still pressing on the accelerator versus somebody who's long ago taken, they're coasting?
Let me break apart your question because you asked a very good question. You said you mentioned the word owner and leadership team in the same thing. If I want my business to grow, I've been doing this 20 years, Jose. I don't have the same level of enthusiasm to do the same thing I've been doing now that I was doing 20 years ago. If I want my business to grow, I need to bring in a professional leadership team, put processes and systems in place, and let those people grow it. Okay, incentivize them to grow it. Now, I'm going to play more of a strategic role, right? As an owner, the owner has the contacts, the owner has the industry information. They have all the stuff that the owner has, but it's got to be almost chairman level, CEO level. There's now, it needs to be someone who's a CEO. And now, granted, you don't need necessarily belly buttons in all of the positions of COO, CFO, et cetera, but the organization needs to be tasked with a growth mentality. And the best way to do that is to bring in third-party professionals. Why is that so important? Because when the business is sold, I just, as the owner, I just step aside. The team's still there. That's
Right, but now, so when I look at that as a game plan on the whiteboard, what you just described, bring in leadership team, move yourself into a more strategic chairman of the board kind of role. In all the years I've worked with business owners as well, I see the number one challenge to that is the owner actually letting go of day-to-day responsibility. Just curious if you found that to be like, to me, I see it as a massive obstacle. Like they may even agree intellectually with what you just said and say, oh, of course, that makes sense. I would love to be chairman. I can have more time and so on. But in practice, the moment the person they put in charge makes a decision that's not exactly the decision they would have made, they get like it's like in what is it, Godfather 2, just when they think I've stepped out, they pull me back in. They pull themselves back in.
They pull themselves away. And the only times I've seen it work effectively, Jose, is when the owner has had enough humility. That's a big word, humility, to bring in somebody to be their, if you will, their coach or their senior advisor, can sit right by them and say, Bob, remember what we said we were going to do? We're going to let him run the business. We're going to let him build the business. And they're looking for something bigger. They're looking for a better lifestyle, and they're looking for the ultimate transferability of the business. Because if Bob has to step in constantly, that is not what a private equity group, a family office, or a strategic buyer wants to see. They don't want to see Bob anywhere near the business. They want Bob to be in Boca.
Okay.
They want him in boat. Put him on a boat. Australia is even better. Get the owner out of it and let the business run around third-party professional management. Now, I realize that's hard for smaller companies, right? A company doing $1 million in top-line revenue is not going to be able to hire a fleet of people. But every time you have the opportunity to outsource, delegate, then you want to do that. The business owner wants to set it and step back from it. We're all, listen, I'm a business owner. We're all the same way. I manage the QuickBooks because it's easy for me. Should I do it? Absolutely not. But when I go to sell, when the time comes for me to sell, I'm going to have to force myself to hand over the keys of something that I could even do better,
Right.
and probably cheaper, and hand it over to someone to do, because I can't be the one doing it. I need to separate. That separation piece is so, so important. And business owners that don't separate, they find one of two things. One, they're not as attractive. And two, after the deal, they end up having to sign a contract to be an employee of the new company for 1 to 3 years. If you're not involved in the business, I had one guy tell me this after we were just about getting to closing. I said, "Hey, Bill, are you going back to the business after lunch?" We had a lunch meeting. He said, "Matt, that's interesting that you would think that." I said, "Think what?" That I came from the business. I hadn't been in the office in 4 weeks. Why would you think I'm going back there? And I thought, well, and he sold his business for just a pile of money. So that's it. It's counterintuitive. And I don't think owners can get there on their, I think they can get the idea, but they really need to say, I am going to hire myself a personal trainer, a coach, a consultant, someone who's by my side, who's going to hold me to our plan, because the owner's natural reaction is jump back in.
But you also said something else, and I kind of want to just, if you don't mind, double down on this point.
Okay.
And that is that I need to find somebody to do something I'm doing that, even though I may still do it better. I just want to challenge that a little bit, because chances are, if you bring in the right person, the fact is they do it better. Like you use QuickBooks as an example, the right kind of, not just bookkeeper, but the right kind of, even a fractional CFO who's spending all day, every day on the things that they do, that they specialize in, is probably going to have some nuanced insight that, just as smart as we might be in our respective businesses, we might not see. It's kind of like the and this is kind of funny, but not good funny, but just interesting. during this last year and a half of being locked down, many of us have learned to become our own barbers, right? So there used to be an expression, you don't cut your own hair. Some need it less than others, some need it more, but but the reality is, I actually want to go to a barber, right? Because I actually want the clippers. I mean, the first time was like really with fear and trepidation, and yes, it kind of works, but it's still not. It's not the same. So it's just interesting that when you look to bring in people who really are good at what they do, even on a fractional basis, and we're like in a fractional economy now. In other words, there's some.
It is fractional. Fractional
Right.
allows it to be smaller. Smaller
Right.
companies can get all this stuff fractionally. Go on.
Everything, right. So even that small $1-2 million business can hire a fractional CFO, can bring in somebody to help with operations, and so on and so forth. These people, these as services, they're probably even a lot more cost effective than trying to find a human to fill that, like you said, belly in the seat full time. So I just wanted to challenge the thought for anyone listening that no, the reality is there's always somebody out there who can do it better. Right.
I've never seen a situation, me personally, whenever I've delegated something and really delegated it properly and supported the person during the delegation process and they took it over, what a feeling of relief that one, I got that off my back because it wasn't the highest and best use of my time. And yeah, there's a transition period, but once again, that's humility on my part. That's the ability to hand something off. And yes, every time, and I'll tell you this, after the deal, and I've seen a lot of deals close, the day after the deal, so many people were like, ding dong, the witch is dead. Thank goodness we don't have to do that anymore because we've been doing something stupid for so many years. Now we have someone who's coming in, they're going to say, well, why do we do that? And everybody goes, I don't know, because Bob always wanted us to do that. And until you kind of strip that back, it's gonna be hard. But what's the issue? There isn't an advisor in a business owner's life who wants them to sell, who promotes the process of selling. Think about it. So I'm a deal guy. I come in at the very end of a deal, right? Most of my clients I've only met because somebody's brought them to me and said they want to sell. Who's the person in front of that? Is it the accountant? In most cases, the accountant is not motivated to have their best client sell and lose that client. It's human nature. Okay. The attorney doesn't know about it. I love my attorney, but I don't kick things around with him.
Right.
I just don't see him that much.
Not when the meter's running by the quarter hour.
I bring him a contract, and I value his opinion, but he's not that person in my world. So, who is the person? And the one person really is a financial advisor, the wealth advisor. They win when the sale happens, but once again, they have a certain level of knowledge of small business transactions that's lacking. And I spend a lot of time working with people on that. Like, for example, I love my wife, been married to her over 30 years. I do not expect that door to open and her to walk in and say, honey, that business that pays our bills, why don't you just sell it?
Right.
You might feel happier that day. That is not happening today. If I said to her, listen, I really want to sell it, I have a reason I want to sell it, she would probably support me. But my point is this, there's nobody that pushes the business owner out and says, you know what, you should sell. You have the right to sell. This is the right time to sell. If you're a business owner, you're waiting for someone in your sphere of influence to walk in and do that, that's not going to happen. You have to find somebody to come into your world and say, okay, I think I want to sell in the next few years. I want to get this business to be as attractive as possible. And by the way, attractive to the outside means profitable on the inside. Okay, as you work to build your business to become more growth oriented, diversified, run by professional management, all that stuff, that is going to make your business so much better that, that I'll give you the secret. You probably won't want to sell it. Because once you step back and stop doing all that stuff you didn't like to do, and you got the thing really running, and there's some new, and it's exciting because there's new products and new services coming in, it's fun to run. People won't want to sell it until the phone rings and somebody calls and says, I've been watching your business, I want to buy it, and then you'll be ready. But until the owner is the catalyst for almost everything that happens in the business. Until the owner decides, I'm going to be the catalyst on my own exit. I have the right to sell. I have the desire to sell, and I have to be creative and think I will figure out what to do once I sell. There is life out there, and it is not just on the golf course. There's things I can do out there. Maybe start another business, maybe help my kids in business. Don't worry about it. You'll find it, because every one of my clients has found something to do. And they're a lot happier on the other side than they were when I met them, I assure you, for the vast majority of people. So let's not worry about that. But once someone starts that process, if the owner's not doing it, if the owner doesn't start it, it will not happen. And that's the frustrating part for me, because they're so busy running the business, they don't think about it.
Well, there's two sides to that. Very very briefly here, Matt, that I could think of right away. One is So if you think you might want to be, you see the exit, maybe not right in the next exit off the highway, but you're thinking you're heading up, you're on a long drive, but you still see it. Okay, in the next 2 years, 3 years, whatever, I need to professionalize my firm. I need to bring in, even on a fractional basis, depending how big I am, where I can hire full time or it's a half-time person, some people to handle things. The upshot of that might be I might actually find I enjoy running my business now because I'm actually more of an investor, leader, strategy guy or gal, as opposed to the day-to-day of the weeds. And then the impetus might be more around de-risking my portfolio, just to not be so tied up. I mean, people have gone through, 9/11, 2008, pandemics. At some point, those cycles get a little wearying for some owners. Understandably, they say things are okay right now, but I don't know what the next cycle might bring in the next 10 years. But it also seems like, and I don't want to lose sight of it in the context of what this podcast. Doing all those things makes your business healthier and very likely more profitable, which is the name of the game. So like just being ready to sell doesn't mean you have to sell it,
Exactly.
but it means you're actually enjoying the experience even more.
There's no doubt about it. Businesses that are highly saleable are the funnest businesses to run because it isn't a grind. It isn't guesswork every morning. People come in and know what they're supposed to do and they do it. And the owners of the business and the management team can then interact with them. What was our goal? Did we accomplish it? How can I help you get there? That's fun business. Putting out fires is not fun. And most business owners are frankly putting out fires. So
Right.
the discipline of doing that, and what I think you pointed out was really, really helpful. If you're worried about this concept, make it 5 years out. Set a goal to sell in 3 to 5 years, because 3 to 5 years is far in the distance. Take the steps now and say, I'm not going to sell for the next 3 to 5 years. But if you go on that path, if you start on that path, you're opening a door that you won't want to close, because you'll be knocking down things that you don't like to do, that are foolish for an owner to do. And it just makes, like I said, it makes life easier. But don't say I have to sell in 6 months. You're running around scrambling, getting
Right.
my corporate docs. No, don't do that. Say it's going to be 3 to 5 years. Set it out. Start on the path. Start to grow the business. If you want to do something, change your business simply to a growth mentality. Just say every year we're going to grow the business. That is, you brought it up earlier, and the reality is that's the bottom line. If I bring someone to the marketplace that is growing year over year, it is an apple and an orange versus a business that is stagnant. And most business owners that sell in their 60s and 70s, I have clients even in their 90s. Those businesses are all flat and stagnant. They're great businesses. We'd all love to own them because they're cash cows, but that's not exciting to a buyer. A buyer wants to take you from point A to point Z.
Right.
Super rocket fuel, $50 million investment. They can see 5 million becoming 500 million because they've done it before. I can't see 5 million becoming 500 million. All I can do is put the pieces in place.
Right. No, that's great, Matt. And Matt, you've shared so much good stuff for our listeners. So first of all, let me just thank you for that. I think that's some great insights, practical approaches to things. If somebody wanted to know more about what you do and your work, where should they go?
Our website is bma1.com. Brandywine Mergers Acquisitions, the number 1.com.
bma1.com. All right, that's easy enough.
Easy enough.
Easy.
That's 3 letters, 1 number.
Yeah, there you go. No, that's fantastic. And certainly would recommend anybody who's even thinking anything here. I know, Matt, you'd be happy to talk to anybody who was wanting to know more about this. So that's fantastic. So thank you again.
Business owners that really want to become students of the game, I'm putting together a beta of a course for business owners.
Okay.
I put a similar course together for financial advisors where I train financial advisors about this. Look, they can find me on my website and
Okay.
shoot me a message.
Well, and then let us know. We'll let our listeners know as well. We'll just send out a notice that it's available when it's available. So fantastic. Something to look forward to. Matt, thanks again so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jose.
Okay.
Take care.